Billie Eilish let this slip in an interview, and the confirmation of this could get her canceled by the Hollywood elites. Now, you may be thinking this is about her controversial coming out as bi in this clip here.
We got to talk about your cover story, because you mentioned that you felt like for a long time women didn't like you, and when that came out, all the women were like, we love her.
I know.
How did that reception feel? Has your mind changed a little bit?
I'm still scared of them, but I think they're pretty.
Did you mean to come out in this story?
Girl, no, I didn't, but I kind of thought, wasn't it obvious? Like, I didn't realize people didn't know, so.
We need to get to a point where you don't even have to come out, so.
I just don't really believe in it. I'm just like, why can't we just exist? I've been doing this for a long time, and I just didn't talk about it. Whoops.
Now, that did make headlines, and it's kind of a controversial take when you think about it in terms of her seemingly dunking on coming out culture, if you will. But I'm actually talking about the story she told regarding the creation of her hit single, What Was I Made For, from the Barbie soundtrack. In this interview, she confirms inadvertently the existence of God.
Phineas literally sat at the piano and immediately started playing the dun, 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 and I immediately was like, what I was made for. And then we were both like, what was I made? Like asking the question after that. And then we did that in probably like 5 minutes. It was it was like it was God. It was God. I don't know. It was like some other. Yeah. Yes. It was just the most perfect example to me of like true inspiration.
Now, those of us who are people of faith would not really consider God being the driving power behind writing a song for the Barbie soundtrack. But there is quite a lot of biblical precedent here, but in a totally different way that we're going to get to. But first, we have to address and maybe speculate a bit on where she is spiritually based on some of the things that's came out from her music and from her interviews. Now, we know that Billie Eilish is kind of known for her horror-like and dark music videos and themes in her content. Now, it's hard to see that and not think about some of the overt demonic and satanic imagery we see all throughout music, media, culture, award shows, obviously the Sam Smith situation, and most recently, Doja Cat coming out and saying that just because she dabbles in some of the imagery and aesthetic, it doesn't make her a Satanist. So when Billie Eilish is making these claims regarding feeling like God helped her write the Barbie song, is she talking about the true and living God, Yahweh, that we see all throughout the scriptures? Or is it some sort of profundity and new age spirituality? Or is it something even worse? Is it demonic influences that are perhaps giving her the lyrics and the melodies to come up with some of these pop songs? Now, in a moment, I'm actually going to show you another clip where she recently proclaimed a fairly straightforward biblical value. But first, what Billie Eilish said in that roundtable discussion about songwriting actually reminded me of a quote from one of my favorite movies ever, Inception. Can you catch the correlation? Well, imagine you're designing a building, right? Consciously creating each aspect, but sometimes it feels like it's almost creating itself, if you know what I mean. Yeah, like I'm discovering it. Genuine inspiration, right? Now, in a dream, our mind continuously does this. We create and perceive our world simultaneously. And our mind does this so well that we don't even know what's happening. Now, Inception is about creating worlds within our dreams. It's a brilliant movie directed by Christopher Nolan. But what I find fascinating about it is the way it describes true inspiration. Now, if we look up the word inspiration and its etymology, the origin of it, what we'll discover is that inspiration is defined as divine guidance. And anyone who's been a creative has discovered this aspect of creating something where it feels like it's just flowing out of you, that you're really discovering it and the creation is creating itself almost. Now, is that divine guidance? Is that Billie Eilish feeling the God of the universe, Yahweh, flowing through her to give her this song for the Barbie movie? Well, let's figure out the answer to that by going to the Bible. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to end." So we know that humans are created in the image of God. This is called the doctrine of the Imago Dei. That also gives us distinct qualities from other creatures. There's also the reality of God's natural law at work within our world and our universe, meaning that the common grace of God isn't just exclusive to the believer. It's also practical for the non-believer. Even for Billie Eilish, who's making a song about the Barbie movie. If the non-Christian discovers the methods and the ways and the wisdom of God, it could help benefit them on this side of eternity. This is probably most clearly communicated in the book of Romans, where Paul is writing the church in Rome, and he's describing how Gentile believers who did not have the Torah, their Bible at the time, are still able to experience God's law because it is written on our conscience. Check this passage out in Romans chapter 2. Even Gentiles who do not have God's written law show that they know his law when they instinctively obey it, even without having heard it. They demonstrate that God's law is written in their hearts for their own conscience, and thoughts either accuse them or tell them that they are doing right. And this is the message I proclaim, that the day is coming when God, through Christ Jesus, will judge everyone's secret life. So in Ecclesiastes, we see that eternity is written on the hearts of man. Paul in Romans 2 says that the law of God is written on our hearts and through our conscience. So biblically speaking, it's not too far off to acknowledge that there's a divine order, that people who are created in the image of God, like Billie Eilish, have certain attributes that allow them to create and flow what seems like divine inspiration, but really it is just the byproduct of what God has done on our hearts, through our conscience, and through common grace. God is the ultimate creator and creates creative people, which is often shown the most in non-Christians' lives, and they come to that realization when they themselves are creating. Wait, did I just accidentally make the case that the Barbie movie is a biblical Christian film? No, I'm just playing around, okay? Don't get angry in the comment section. Just follow me for one more second. But to further drive home this point, check out the time when Billie Eilish boldly proclaimed this specific biblical value about a very toxic and pervasive thing that is taking over our society.
As a woman, I think porn is a disgrace, and I used to watch a lot of porn, to be honest. I started watching porn when I was like 11. I thought that's how you learned how to have sex. I was watching abusive. I feel incredibly devastated that I was exposed to so much porn. I think that I had like sleep paralysis and these like almost like night terror / just nightmares because of it. I think that's how they started, because I would just watch abusive. I couldn't watch anything else, like unless it was violent. I like didn't think it was attractive, and I was a virgin. I had never done anything, and so it led to problems. I'm so angry that porn is so loved.
Honestly, that's the first time I've listened to that thing all the way through, and if I'm honest with you, that is pretty dark. But the sad part is she learned this intrinsically after the fact. She learned this by putting her hand on the stove and discovering that the stove is hot. But I would venture off to say that she knew this, and most of us know that explicit porn isn't good for us. It's not good for society, and it's not beneficial or empowering to women. So it's really interesting to hear someone like Billie Eilish boldly say this on the Howard Stern show of all places. Now, I don't want to end this video on a dark note, because that sure was dark, but I have one more Bible verse that I think will bring to light what I'm ultimately trying to get at. Later, Paul writes in Romans 11:29, "For God's gifts and his call can never be withdrawn." So what I'm not saying is that I believe that Billie Eilish is being inspired by the Holy Spirit when she's writing a song for Barbie. But what I do believe is that God deposits certain talents in people, and he doesn't take those away just because they may not use them for his glory. That God allows creative people to create, and oftentimes them creating testifies that they are creative, being created by an ultimate creative God. And although we can use our gifts without having a thriving relationship with God, the ultimate way to use our gifts and maintain peace and fulfillment is to use them for the glory of God, not to use them to build our own castle, but to build God's kingdom. And that's why when you see people using their gifts to glorify themselves and maybe even defaming or mocking God, they often burn out. We saw Billie Eilish have to cancel her tour because of mental health issues and depression. And we often see famous and creative people completely lose it and have mental breakdown. And I would argue it's because of a lack of alignment with using their time, talent, and treasure to serve their purpose in this lifetime, which is ultimately to know God and make him known. In the very next chapter, Romans 12, Paul pleads with us to do just that. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And if you want to see a conversation I had with one of the biggest movie stars in Hollywood about this exact topic and how he's able to navigate a career in some of the biggest blockbuster movies, check out my conversation with Tyrese right over here, where we get into some of the tension he's faced as being a bold, unapologetic believer in Hollywood.